Hello, all. My name is Kalilur Rahman. I'm from DLC's Global Strategy and Execution Committee, Hyderabad chapter. I'm an experienced IT professional working for a large pharma company as the global head for software testing and archival. Today, I'm here to talk about artificial intelligence and ethics of using artificial intelligence and what it means when it comes to digital transformation. So, let me start with some introduction on what happened in 1927. There was this movie made by Fritz Lang called Metropolis, which kind of introduced how technocratic society and people living there would be categorized as haves and have-nots. And if you move one century forward, in the current context, AI has taken over the world by storm, and there are a lot of you know challenges in using AI effectively. There are companies that have really leveraged AI to an extent that they become the global leading companies, right? And there are challenges in using AI. I will be covering that as we go along in this speech. As far as humanity is concerned, it has progressed phenomenally over the past century, thanks to the technological explosion, and the science and engineering has really taken us to the next level. If you take the average life expectancy, it has phenomenally grown thanks to the innovations in medicine and chemistry and pharmaceutical industry. And if you take technology as it, since the advent of computers getting introduced after World War II, the world has progressed phenomenally. If you take the origin of robots, when Carl Capek introduced the robo in 19th, early 20th century, there were certain aspects that came along when the definition of robo. It meant to be a worker, and Isaac Asimov came up with the great concept of what are the fundamental rules that goes into leveraging robo, right? And if you take artificial intelligence, which was actually coinage, if neural networks and the artificial intelligence, they all came along in the 1950s. And but the word, the neural networks and the core concept of how artificial intelligence can be taken up was from a neurological experiment. Two scientists in the US came up with this concept of artificial intelligence. In 1956, the Dartmouth College, the artificial intelligence was defined. And if you take the phenomenal computer scientist Alan Turing, he came up with the Turing machine and the definition of what makes it a powerful device, right? If you take the current context, right, let's take what happened in the last 30 years, right? Artificial intelligence is not a new concept. There were a lot of things when it comes to neural networks, genetic algorithms. Some of the foundations that we use as basics today were invented in the 1980s, right? With greats like Greg Hinton of University of Toronto. There were a lot of concepts that were introduced. But when the computing power increased with Moore's law, and the storage and computing power increase, the ability to process the logic, ability to process data and use artificial intelligence became an effective process, right? But when it comes to the actual use of artificial intelligence, there are two folds. There are good use. If you take science, there is obviously a good use and a bad use, right? When it takes artificial intelligence, right, it is actually developed by humans. And when you design algorithms, that algorithms carry a bit of cognitive intelligence and cognitive dissonance and cognitive biases the actual people develop, right? So if you take artificial intelligence, the number of people working in artificial intelligence and machine learning are limited compared to men. The women are less compared to men. And if you take various aspects of the people who actually design these applications, it's like the minorities tend to be in the 4 to 5%. It's majority of the leading machine learning programmers or white young male are doing the algorithm. So if you develop an algorithm, develop a concept using this larger sect and apply across the board, it is bound to have a lot of challenges. Yeah, let's take an example. There was a study done wherein the algorithm developed by an organization was fed various images of children laughing, right? Young children, infants actually laughing. So it was tested and developed using certain sets of images. But in reality, when the actual images of various types of children, say for example, a Caucasian young or white child, or an African American child, and then Asian, and some of the some of the children in the southern region of the world, South America, were all fed. It was able to detect whether the child was laughing or smiling or crying. But similarly, when certain features of the Chinese and Mongoloid children were fed, the algorithm was not able to decipher whether the children were, crying or laughing. It was due to the inbuilt features and biases that were fed into algorithms. So it kind of tells, artificial intelligence, to get to a sentient state, or having a general intelligence, like billions of neurons that our brain is able to process, it's still a long way to go. So the algorithm that get developed are only as good as the cognitive dissonances and biases the actual developers come into picture when they develop the code. So in order to make it more impactful and powerful, you need to have a wider range of data, and lots of samples need to be fed, and you need to take out any inherent and uh, unrecognizable biases that the developers may feed into it. Yeah, if you take artificial general intelligence, we still have a long way to go. You need to take the example of human brain, how many billions of neurons we have, and then how you replicate what our human brains are capable of doing into an algorithm. That's still a long way to go. So the way to do it is, you need to take out the biases in it. So when you are developing an artificial intelligence algorithm, you need to make it fair. There are concepts such as fair data principle. How do you make the data fair, and how do you make the data without biases, right? So that is another important thing. So garbage in, garbage out, they say. So you need to make sure the data you feed, the sample you feed, the concepts you feed are without biases. So that's where having an ethical view and ethical mindset comes into picture. So one example I would take with regards to Google, if you, a few years back, when you were to do a search of in Google Translate, right? If you type "he is a doctor," it would give you a translation of a Turkish equivalent of "he is a doctor," and then when you feed it back, reverse reverse translate, it would say "he is a doctor." When you do "she is a doctor," and then translate, it would give a Turkish equivalent of that. And if you feed it back in there and you do a translate, it would say "he is a doctor." So there were certain inherent biases that were built into algorithm. Google has since fixed that issue. So there are certain challenges, right? There is tagging and labeling of certain types of data set that could result in biases. How do you remove the biases from there? And it can be, if you take a practical example, if you take insurance, right? How people, certain geographies and location may get more higher premium than others. It could be due to the labeling, how the algorithm is fed information with. So that is definitely something which needs to be looked at. So having said all that, if you take another example, like a few years back, there was a passenger traveling via Indigo airplane from one location to another. He was supposed to go to Calcutta, and his baggage landed in Hyderabad, and he used a tweet saying, "Thank you, Indigo. I arrived safely at my location, but my baggage landed in Hyderabad." He said it in a sarcastic manner. The automated chatbot replied, "Thank you for letting us know. We are happy you had a nice journey." It was not able to recognize what really happened. So when you apply certain algorithms, certain concepts, certain methods in, you need to make sure it understands the context, it applies a fair principle in it, and then is able to take the right responsibility. So you cannot fully rely on technology as is. So you need to make sure you do a certain fair data principle. So that's why there are a lot of organizations and the counties, the states and countries have come up with various governance models. There was a AI governance model which was launched by the Harvard University. Professors Gasser and Almeida came up with the artificial, governance intelligence governance model. One was on the technical layer, then was an ethical layer, and then there was another on the business layer. So you need to make sure the layers are taken care and you are applying the ethical principle across the board. So while it is difficult to reach 100% efficiency, but having good data, good approach, and applying various concepts ethically can be a good way to make the algorithm become very capable. Technology can be a boon or a bane, right? There are a lot of examples on how AI can be a boon, right? If you take a recent example of how Google came up with Lambda chatbot, the Lambda chatbot is able to generate conversational AI based script in such a way that it can pass the Turing test, which means it is difficult to say whether it's generated by human or a computer. Similarly, there are other tools such as GPT-3, DAL-E, and whether lot of image generation algorithm which generate output in such a way that it is difficult to say whether it's done by a human or a computer. So there are a lot of good ways the technologies can be leveraged, and there are governments using the technology and tools for various innovative purposes. It could be how you can use AI and drones and robots to actually identify, all the problem areas in case of a flood and then take necessary action. Blood bank in an African nation was able to use drones and technologies to send blood samples or blood for donation drives in areas that are inaccessible. So there are plenty of examples where AI and technology can be used in an efficient manner. But at the same time, if you don't do it in the right way, if it falls into the wrong hands, then the results can be catastrophic. That needs to be addressed. So that's why if you take certain defense establishment, they want to create maybe a universal soldier embedded with lot of technology capabilities, but only for protection and defense purposes. But what if it is misused? It could result in catastrophe. So there are a lot of rules and regulations being followed by some of the leading defense organizations, right? And use AI in such a way that it is able to help propel humanity to the next level. So AI definitely is a boon if it's thought through in the right manner with ethical concepts, and for only with the regulations that help us achieve the real benefit of AI. Just like what happened in pharma. If you take pharma, the actual drug development earlier, there were a lot of unethical drugs or dangerous drugs were all getting introduced, but with proper regulation and rules such as FDA coming into picture, checking the clinical trials and making sure the right drugs are approved or right medicines are approved for actual use, that resulted in better life expectancy and better health benefits for the actual users. Similarly, if you take AI, if you come up with the good regulations, good principle and ethical use of AI, it can definitely take humanity to the next level, and we would be happy getting our deliveries done via drone without a need to get out of balcony, or getting from one place to another without getting worried about the traffic jams and stuff, right? There are a lot of use cases. AI can be the future if it is used in the right way, in an ethical manner, and with one single purpose, that is making sure the humanity is able to leverage the power of technology to take us to the next level. Thank you very much.